Today we are taking up Shakespeare's sonnet number 94, They that have power to hurt and will do none. Now, before we start with this poem, let's talk a bit about Shakespearean sonnets. Now, Shakespearean sonnets are composed of 14 lines and most are divided into 3 quatrains and a final couplet, rhyming A B, C D, C D, E F, E F, G G. Now, this sonnet form and rhyme scheme is known as the English or the Shakespearean sonnet. Sonnet number 1 to 126 seem to be addressed to a young man socially superior to the speaker. The first 17 sonnets encourage this youth to procreate. After this, the sonnets diversify in their subjects. Some celebrate the master, mistress of my passion, like Sonnet 20, while others reflect upon the lovely boy, Sonnet 126, as a cause of anguish, as the speaker desperately wishes for his behavior to be different from what it is. Sonnets 127 to 154 are addressed to a dark lady. Now, on the text, on the screen, you find sonnet number 94, which you can follow as I teach the poem. And here you have the paraphrase in modern English, which will help you to understand the poem better. Now, a bit about this sonnet. Sonnet 94 is one of the most difficult sonnets in the sequence. The poet jumps from an almost opaque description of these mysterious people who have the power to hurt and will do none, to an almost inexplicable description of a flower in the summer. The two parts of the poem seem almost unconnected. Now, in order to understand both on their own and in relation to one another, it is necessary to understand something about the tradition out of which the first 126 sonnets were written. Considered one of the most challenging and ambiguous of all the sonnets, Shakespeare's sonnet number 94, beginning with They that have the power to hurt and will do none, is one of the top 5 best sonnets in the whole sequence. Now, it is often thought to be the most enigmatic of the sonnets. In the past, it was presented as the type and model of a detached observation on human nature. But nowadays, greater emphasis is placed on setting it in the context of the surrounding sonnets, like from 87 to 96, in which the youth is portrayed as potentially fickle and ready to abandon the pledges he has made, a beauteous flower but corrupted at the core. The sonnet is cast as a series of meditative essays on a certain type of personality, and no reference is made to the speaker or the person addressed, as if the use of I and you and personal pronouns were being studiously avoided. It may be that it was written in response to a development of the situation outlined in sonnets number 90 to 93, where the youth seems to be ready to abandon the poet to forget past promises and to cast him aside. All those foregoing sonnets were written with suggestions of uncertainty, as if the poet was unable to know if the youth had abandoned him or not. Now, it is possible that some act or failure to act or some statement made in the charmed circle of the youth's admirers have convinced the poet that his beloved is one of those fortunate few who move others but is himself as stone, unmoved, and that all along he has given a false impression of what he intends to do. Therefore, there are grounds for cautious optimism, or so the poet thinks, for the youth perhaps will remain faithful after all, despite his previous behavior. And there is hope that all will now be well after the ravages of suspicion which have so much damaged the former trust. But alas, there is a threat, and that some festering evil will shortly destroy the poet's hopes. For sweetest things often turn sour, and his optimism may well prove to be unfounded. Now let's take the poem quatrain wise. Take up the first quatrain. They that have power to hurt and will do none, that do not do the thing they most do show, who moving others are themselves as stone, unmoved, cold, and to temptation slow. Now we notice the poet talks about a particular kind of people, who they that have the power to hurt. Now some people have the power to hurt others but will not do it, and will do none. That do not do the thing they most do show. They try to show that they are of a particular type. They try to show that they will do certain things for others, but they will not do it. Who moving others are themselves as stone. These people have the power to create passions in others, desires in others, but are themselves as feelingless as stone, unmoved, cold, and to temptation slow. What kind of people are they? They are unmoved. Unmoved, that is, they cannot be moved by anything. They are cold. Now, feelingless, emotionless people are always referred to as cold. So, the stone is cold. Similarly, these kind of people are cold. And to temptation slow, they are slow to give in to temptation. Now, remember one thing, the poet does not say that they are totally bereft of temptation. They give in to temptation, but slowly. The first 8 lines, meaning if we take 2 quatrains of this very difficult sonnet, we find they are devoted to the description of a certain kind of impressive, restrained person, they that have the power to hurt and do not use that power. These people seem not to do the thing they are most apparently able to do. They do not do the things they most do show, and while they may move others, they remain themselves as stone, cold and slow to feel temptation. Coming to the second quatrain, they rightly do inherit heaven's graces and husband nature's riches from expense. They are the lords and owners of their faces, others but stewards of their excellence. Now, what do? They rightly do inherit heaven's graces. Heaven has bestowed them with a beautiful face, with good graces, and husband nature's riches from expense. What do? They do not expend their energies in passionate outbursts. They are very controlled. They are the lord and owners of their faces. So they own their faces. They are the lords of it, meaning they can do what they want. They can be pleased with whomsoever they want, and they do not give in to expression. They do not express their emotions. Others, but stewards of their excellence. Other people are who? They are stewards, meaning caretakers of their excellence, meaning they have to wait upon the pleasure of these kinds of people, that when will they show their emotion, when will they show their affection. These people have to just stand and wait, just like caretakers of a property have to wait for the owner of the property. People such as these, the speaker says, inherit heaven's graces, meaning blessings of heaven, and protect the riches of nature from expenditure. They are the lords and owners of their faces, completely in control of themselves, and others can only hope to steward a part of their excellence. We take the next quatrain. The summer's flower is to the summer sweet, though to itself it only live and die. But if that flower with base infection meet, the basest weed outbraves his dignity. Now, the summer's flower, the flowers that come up during the summer season, are sweet. They look sweet and beautiful in the summer season. But the flower is itself, it does not recognize its worth. It does not recognize its sweetness. It just lives because it has to live. It dies only because it has to die. It does not understand the beauty that has been bestowed upon it. But if that flower with base infection meets, suppose the flower contracts an infection, the basest weed outbraves his dignity, then even the worst of weeds. Now, weeds are basically what? They are small parasitic plants. They will destroy the crop. If in a plantation you have got weeds, they have to be uprooted. Why? Because they destroy the vegetation. So, even the worst of weeds will be better than a summer's flower which has been infected with any kind of disease. The summer's flower, like the cold aristocrats of the first 2 quatrains, is beautiful only in and for itself. It has no interest in the fact that the summer loves it, because to itself it only lives and dies. Like the summer, the speaker hopes he can love the young man simply for his beauty without expecting anything in return. But he is forced to acknowledge that the young man is not so neutral and inactive. He has committed hurtful deeds which act like a base infection in the flower to render it lower than a weed. Now, coming to the final couplet, for sweetest things turn sourest by their deeds, lilies that fester smell far worse than weeds. So, the sweetest things, if the most beautiful things, most beautiful people commit bad deeds, all the beauty goes in vain. So, persons of the character in question are colorless. They are colorless like lilies, and they are not like beautiful blushing roses. Lilies that fester smell worse than weeds. So, lilies that are rotting, they smell worse than any weed can smell. The speaker observes that it is behavior that determines the worth of a person or a thing. Sweet things which behave badly turn sour. What is the use of those things being sweet? Just as a flower that festers smells worse than a weed. The couplet brilliantly brings the two parts of the poem into full relation. The first line refers specifically to the first part of the poem, which started with sweetest things turn sourest by their deeds, as opposed to the perfect creatures who do not do hurtful deeds. And the second half refers to the metaphor of the flower, lilies that fester, a sour deed, smell far worse than weeds. Now, if you have any questions based on this, you can leave it in the segment below and I shall answer them. Thank you.